You don't inspire others by pointing the way. You do it by walking it with them. When people feel heard, they listen. When they feel valued, they act. That's the heart of influence. If you want others to take action, stop trying to control and start trying to connect. Show real interest. Offer real encouragement. People will surprise you with their strength when they feel your belief. You don't need pressure. You need presence. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Here's what most people don't understand about inspiration. They believe it's about having the right words, the perfect argument, or the most compelling logic. They think if they can just build the right case, present the right facts, line up the right reasons, then people will naturally be moved to action. They're wrong. I've spent my life studying human nature. I've watched thousands of people in boardrooms, in living rooms, in classrooms, in conference halls. And here's what I've learned. Logic can make people think, but only emotion makes them act. You can present all the data in the world. You can craft the most brilliant presentation. You can outline every benefit, every advantage, every logical reason why someone should move forward. But if you haven't touched their heart, you haven't touched them at all. Think about the last time you were truly inspired to take action. Was it because someone overwhelmed you with statistics? Was it because they gave you a flawless logical argument? No. It was because something inside you stirred, something deeper than reason, something that made you feel alive, hopeful, or understood. That's the secret. The heart is the gateway to action. When you speak to someone's deepest desires, their fears, their dreams, their sense of purpose, that's when they move. When you connect with what they value most, what keeps them awake at night, what they hope for their children, that's when you inspire. But let me ask you this. How often do you take the time to discover what really matters to the person you're trying to influence? How often do you ask about their dreams before you share your plans? How often do you listen to their concerns before you present your solutions? Most people skip this step entirely. They dive straight into their agenda, their goals, their vision. They talk about what they want to achieve without ever understanding what the other person wants to achieve. That's not inspiration. That's instruction. And instruction without connection creates resistance, not action. Here's a simple truth. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They don't care about your vision until they see how it serves their vision. They don't care about your success until they understand how it contributes to their success. So before you try to inspire anyone, invest time in understanding them. What do they value? What do they fear? What do they hope for? What would success look like in their world? When you know what moves them, you can speak to what moves them. When you understand their heart, you can reach their heart. And when you reach their heart, you reach their hands. You reach their energy. You reach their commitment. This isn't manipulation. This is connection. This is recognizing that every person has dreams, struggles, and aspirations that matter deeply to them. When you honor those dreams, when you speak to those aspirations, when you show how your vision aligns with their values, that's when inspiration happens. The mind processes information. The heart processes meaning. Give people meaning, and they'll give you everything they have. People don't care what you want until they feel you care about what they want. Begin by listening deeply. I once knew a manager who couldn't understand why his team wasn't motivated. He offered bonuses. He set clear goals. He gave passionate speeches about company vision. Nothing worked. His people remained disengaged, going through the motions without real commitment. Then, one day, he tried something different. Instead of talking, he listened. He sat down with each team member individually, not to give direction, but to ask questions. What did they enjoy most about their work? What frustrated them? What did they hope to accomplish in their careers? What mattered most to them outside of work? What he discovered changed everything. Sarah, his top performer, wasn't motivated by money. She was driven by learning new skills that would help her start her own business someday. Michael, who seemed disinterested, was actually passionate about the work. but felt invisible. No one ever acknowledged his contributions. Lisa was struggling with the commute and worried about missing time with her young children. Once he understood what each person valued, everything shifted. He created learning opportunities for Sarah. He made sure Michael's contributions were recognized publicly. He worked with Lisa to find flexible scheduling options. Within 2 months, his team's performance transformed completely. Here's what that manager learned. You can't inspire someone you don't understand. Most people approach influence backwards. They start with what they want to achieve and then try to convince others to help them achieve it. But inspiration doesn't work that way. Inspiration starts with understanding what others want to achieve and then showing them how working together serves everyone's goals. Think about the people you're trying to inspire right now. Do you really know what drives them? Do you understand their personal goals, their concerns, their values? Do you know what success looks like through their eyes? If you're honest, probably not. Most of us make assumptions. We assume others are motivated by the same things that motivate us. We assume they share our priorities, our values, our definition of success. We assume they see the world the way we see it. That's a costly mistake. Every person is fighting battles you know nothing about. Every person has dreams you've never heard about. Every person has a unique combination of fears, hopes, experiences, and aspirations that shape how they view every opportunity, every request, every invitation to act. Until you understand that unique combination, you're shooting in the dark. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone where you asked more questions than you made statements? When was the last time you spent more time learning about their goals than talking about yours? Real understanding requires real curiosity. It requires setting aside your agenda long enough to discover theirs. It requires asking thoughtful questions and then actually listening to the answers, not just waiting for your turn to talk. What are their biggest challenges right now? What would they like to be different about their situation? What opportunities excite them most? What concerns keep them up at night? What would have to happen for them to feel truly successful? These aren't small talk questions. These are insight questions. These are the questions that reveal what really matters to someone. And here's what happens when you take the time to understand. People feel seen. They feel valued. They feel like you actually care about them as a person, not just as a means to your end. That feeling creates openness. It creates trust. It creates a willingness to listen when you do have something to share. More importantly, understanding gives you the ability to connect your vision with their vision. When you know what someone values, you can show how your goals serve their goals. When you understand their concerns, you can address those concerns. When you know their dreams, you can show how working together moves them closer to those dreams. This isn't about changing your message to tell people what they want to hear. This is about discovering the genuine connections between what you're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to accomplish. Those connections exist. They always exist, but you can only find them if you take the time to look. Understanding isn't just the first step in inspiration. Understanding is inspiration. When people feel truly understood, they're already halfway to being inspired. Inspiration begins with dignity. Lift others up, and they'll rise higher than they ever thought possible. There's a moment in every interaction where you make a choice. You can make the other person feel important, or you can make them feel insignificant. You can elevate their sense of worth, or you can diminish it. You can help them see their potential, or you can remind them of their limitations. This choice determines everything that follows. I've seen leaders who could fill a room with energy simply by walking in, not because they were the smartest or the most successful, but because they had mastered the art of making others feel valuable. They remembered names. They asked about people's families. They acknowledged contributions. They spoke to people as if their thoughts and opinions truly mattered. And people responded by giving their best effort, their best ideas, their best energy. I've also seen leaders who drained the life out of every room they entered. They talked down to people. They dismissed ideas without consideration. They made others feel foolish for asking questions or suggesting improvements. They treated people as interchangeable parts rather than unique individuals with something valuable to offer. Those leaders got compliance but never commitment. They got minimum effort, never maximum potential. Here's what I learned from watching these two types of leaders. You make people feel big, or you make them feel small. There's no neutral ground. Every word you speak, every gesture you make, every expression on your face either adds to someone's sense of dignity or takes away from it, either builds their confidence or undermines it, either makes them feel capable or incapable. Most people are walking around feeling smaller than they want to feel. They're dealing with self-doubt. They're worried about not being good enough, smart enough, experienced enough. They're comparing themselves to others and coming up short. They're remembering past failures and wondering if they have what it takes to succeed. When you encounter someone in that state of mind, you have incredible power. You can either confirm their worst fears about themselves, or you can help them see possibilities they hadn't considered. Which choice do you think inspires action? When you make someone feel big, when you treat them as capable, intelligent, valuable, something magical happens. They start to see themselves differently. They start to believe they can do more than they thought they could do. They start to act like the person you see them as being. This isn't about false praise or empty flattery. This is about recognizing genuine strengths and speaking to real potential. This is about seeing the best in people and helping them see it too. But let me ask you this. How do you typically respond when someone makes a mistake? How do you react when someone disagrees with your idea? How do you handle it when someone asks a question that seems obvious to you? Your response in those moments reveals everything about your ability to inspire. Do you correct them in a way that preserves their dignity or in a way that embarrasses them? Do you welcome their different perspective or do you shut it down? Do you answer their question with patience or with impatience that makes them feel foolish for asking? Here's a truth that will change how you interact with people. Everyone you meet knows something you don't know. Everyone has experiences you haven't had. Everyone has insights you haven't considered. Everyone has value you haven't discovered. When you approach people with that mindset, you naturally treat them with respect. You naturally make them feel important. You naturally create an environment where they want to contribute their best thinking and their best effort. People don't just want to be useful. They want to be valued. They want to feel like their contributions matter. They want to believe that what they bring to the table makes a difference. Give them that feeling, and they'll give you everything they have. Take that feeling away, and they'll give you just enough to get by. The most inspiring leaders I've known understood this principle completely. They made people feel bigger than they felt before the conversation started. They spoke to potential, not just performance. They saw strengths, not just weaknesses. They offered dignity, not just direction, and people followed them not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Not because they were afraid of the consequences of not following, but because they were excited about the possibilities of following. That's the power of making people feel big. That's the foundation of all true inspiration. Most people are waiting for permission to become who they were meant to be. Be the one who gives it. I remember a young woman who worked in my office years ago. Quiet, hard-working, but she always held back in meetings. She had ideas, I could see it in her eyes, but she never shared them. When asked direct questions, she would apologize before answering, as if her thoughts weren't worth the time it took to express them. One day after a meeting, I pulled her aside. I told her I had noticed she seemed to have thoughts about the project we were discussing. I asked if she would be willing to share her perspective with me privately. What followed was 15 minutes of brilliant insights. She had seen problems the rest of us had missed. She had solutions we hadn't considered. She had a vision for improvement that was both practical and innovative. I looked at her and said, "These ideas are excellent. The team needs to hear this. Will you present these thoughts at tomorrow's meeting? She looked terrified. I don't think I'm qualified to... I stopped her. I believe you're exactly the right person to share this. You see things the rest of us don't see. That's not a limitation, that's a gift. The next day she presented her ideas. They were well received. More importantly, something changed in her. She began to speak up regularly. She began to contribute confidently. Within 6 months, she was leading projects. Within a year, she was promoted. What changed? Her capabilities hadn't suddenly improved overnight. Her intelligence hadn't increased. Her experience hadn't dramatically expanded. What changed was that someone believed in her before she believed in herself. Here is what most people don't understand about human potential. It's not just about what someone can do. It's about what they believe they can do. And that belief is often determined by whether someone else believes in them first. Most people are carrying around a story about their limitations. They've been told they're not leadership material. They've been told they're not creative. They've been told they're not strategic thinkers. They've been told they don't have what it takes. Those stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. People live down to the expectations that have been set for them. But when someone sees past those stories, when someone sees potential that others have missed, everything changes. When someone believes in capabilities that haven't been fully expressed yet, it gives permission for those capabilities to emerge. Think about the people in your life right now, your team members, your family members, your friends. What potential do you see in them that they might not see in themselves? What strengths do they have that they're not fully using? What capabilities are they holding back because no one has told them those capabilities are valuable? Your belief in their potential might be exactly what they need to unlock it. But let me ask you this. How do you express belief in someone? How do you communicate confidence in their abilities without sounding patronizing or insincere? It starts with being specific. Instead of general encouragement like, "You're great," point to specific strengths you've observed. You have a unique ability to see solutions that others miss. You ask questions that get to the heart of the issue. You have a way of explaining complex ideas that makes them easy to understand. It continues with giving opportunities. Belief without opportunity is just nice words. If you really believe someone can do more, give them the chance to do more. Assign them a project that stretches their abilities. Ask them to lead a meeting. Invite them to share their ideas with a larger group. It deepens with persistence. Don't give up after one conversation. Keep reinforcing your belief. Keep pointing out their successes. Keep reminding them of their strengths. Most people need to hear it multiple times before they start to believe it themselves, and it's completed with patience. People don't change overnight. They don't step into their full potential immediately. There will be setbacks. There will be moments of doubt. There will be times when they revert to their old story about their limitations. Stay with them through that process. Keep believing even when they stop believing. Keep seeing their potential even when they can't see it themselves. Here's what happens when you consistently believe in people before they believe in themselves. They start to live up to your expectations instead of living down to their fears. They start to take risks they wouldn't have taken before. They start to pursue opportunities they would have passed by. Most importantly, they start to believe they have something valuable to offer. And once someone truly believes in their own value, they become unstoppable. Your belief in others isn't just encouragement. It's transformation. It's the spark that ignites potential that might otherwise remain dormant forever. Criticism creates resistance. Honest, specific praise creates motion. Inspire with encouragement, not correction. There are two ways to get a horse to jump higher. You can use a whip, or you can raise the bar gradually while celebrating every successful jump. Both methods might work in the short term, but only one creates a horse that loves to jump. The same principle applies to inspiring people. I've watched managers try to motivate their teams through constant correction. They point out every mistake. They focus on every shortcoming. They believe that if they just criticize enough, people will be motivated to improve to avoid further criticism. What they create instead is fear, resentment, and minimum effort. People do just enough to avoid getting in trouble, but they never do enough to excel. They become defensive rather than creative. They hide problems rather than solve them. They focus more energy on avoiding blame than on achieving results. Then, I've watched other managers take a completely different approach. They catch people doing things right. They acknowledge progress, even small progress. They celebrate improvements, even incremental improvements. They praise effort as much as results. What they create is enthusiasm, commitment, and maximum effort. People stretch themselves because they want to earn more recognition. They volunteer for challenging assignments because they trust they'll be supported rather than criticized if they struggle. They bring problems to light because they know they'll be appreciated for finding solutions. The difference isn't just in the results, the difference is in the experience. One approach makes work feel like punishment, the other makes work feel like opportunity. Here's what I've learned about human nature. People move toward appreciation and away from criticism. They repeat behaviors that get recognized and avoid behaviors that get criticized. They give their best effort to leaders who notice their best effort. But let me ask you this. What gets more of your attention? What people do wrong or what they do right? When you're reviewing someone's work, do you spend more time pointing out mistakes or acknowledging successes? Most people have been trained to focus on problems. We notice what's broken. We see what's missing. We identify what needs to be fixed. It's a useful skill for quality control, but it's a terrible skill for inspiration. Inspiration requires a different kind of attention. It requires noticing progress, acknowledging effort, recognizing improvement. It requires seeing the good that's already there and celebrating it before addressing what needs to change. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or avoiding difficult conversations. It means leading with recognition before moving to correction. It means building people up before asking them to step up. When someone feels appreciated for what they're doing right, they're open to feedback about what they could do better. When someone feels criticized for what they're doing wrong, they're defensive about any suggestion for improvement. The sequence matters enormously. I once knew a teacher who transformed struggling students by using what she called the sandwich method. She would start with something the student was doing well, then address one area for improvement, then end with another positive observation. "John, your effort on this project is really impressive. I can see you put a lot of thought into the research. Let's work on organizing your ideas more clearly so your excellent insights come through even stronger." Your curiosity about this topic is exactly what makes a great student. John left those conversations feeling capable rather than inadequate. He felt motivated to improve rather than defensive about his mistakes. He felt like someone who was good at learning rather than someone who was bad at school. That's the power of praise-based inspiration. But here's the key. The praise has to be genuine and specific. Generic compliments like, "good job," don't inspire anyone. Specific recognition like, "your solution to the delivery problem saved us 3 hours every day," creates real motivation. People need to know exactly what they did well so they can do more of it. They need to understand the impact of their efforts so they feel the value of their contributions. They need to hear appreciation that feels earned rather than automatic. When you give that kind of recognition consistently, something remarkable happens. People start looking for ways to earn more of it. They start taking pride in their work. They start seeing themselves as capable of excellence rather than prone to mistakes. And once someone sees themselves as capable of excellence, they start producing excellent work naturally. Not because they're afraid of criticism, but because they're excited about recognition. Not because they have to, but because they want to. That's when inspiration becomes self-sustaining. That's when people motivate themselves because they know their efforts will be noticed and appreciated. The best way to get action is to invite it. People will do more when it feels like their idea. I learned one of my most important lessons about influence from watching a master salesman work. I expected to see him using high-pressure tactics, overwhelming customers with benefits, or pushing hard for the close. Instead, I watched him do something completely different. He asked questions. What would be most helpful for your situation? How do you see this fitting into your current plans? What concerns do you have about moving forward? What would need to happen for this to feel right to you? By the end of the conversation, the customer was selling himself. He was explaining why the product made sense for him. He was addressing his own objections. He was talking himself into the purchase. The salesman barely had to say anything. He just asked the right questions and listened to the answers. That's when I understood a fundamental truth about human nature. People resist being told what to do, but they embrace what they decide to do themselves. Think about your own experience. How do you react when someone demands that you take action? When someone tells you what you must do, what you should do, what you have to do? Even if you agree with the logic, something inside you resists the pressure. Now think about how you react when someone asks for your input, seeks your opinion, invites your participation. When someone says, "What do you think about this?" or "How would you approach this?" or "Would you be willing to consider this?" The invitation feels completely different from the demand. The invitation respects your autonomy. The demand challenges. Here's what most people miss about inspiration. It's not about convincing people to do what you want them to do. It's about helping them discover that what you want them to do is what they want to do too. And the best way to help people make that discovery is to ask questions that lead them to their own conclusions instead of saying, "You need to improve." Your presentation skills ask, "How do you feel about your comfort level when presenting to groups?" Instead of saying, "You should take on more leadership responsibilities," ask, "What kind of impact would you like to have on the team?" The question opens a conversation. The statement closes it. The question invites exploration. The statement demands acceptance. The question treats the other person as a partner in finding the solution. The statement treats them as someone who needs to be convinced. But let me ask you this. How often do you ask questions when you're trying to influence someone? How often do you seek their input instead of giving your opinion? How often do you invite their participation instead of requesting their compliance? Most people skip the questions because they think they already know what needs to happen. They've identified the problem, developed the solution, and now they just need to get everyone else on board. But here's what they're missing. The best solutions come from the people who have to implement them. The most sustainable changes come from people who helped design them. The strongest commitment comes from people who feel ownership of the decision. When you ask instead of demand, you tap into all of that wisdom, creativity, and commitment. What do you think is causing this problem? Often leads to insights you hadn't considered. How would you solve this? Often generates solutions better than the ones you had in mind. What would make this work for you? Often reveals obstacles you didn't know existed and opportunities you hadn't seen. The questions don't just help people feel involved. They help you get better results. There's another benefit to asking instead of demanding. It removes resistance. When people feel like they're being pushed, they naturally push back. When they feel like they're being invited to think and contribute, they naturally lean in. The most inspiring leaders I've known were master questioners. They didn't tell people what to think. They asked questions that helped people think more. Clearly, they didn't impose their vision. They asked questions that helped people see how the vision served their own interests. They understood that people don't resist their own ideas. They embrace them, defend them, and work hard to make them successful. So before you tell someone what they need to do, ask them what they think needs to be done. Before you give them your solution, ask them for theirs. Before you make your request, ask them what would make sense from their perspective. You might be surprised by how often their answer aligns with what you were hoping for anyway. If you want people to move, show them how your vision serves their future too. I once watched A CEO tried to rally his company around a new strategic direction. He talked passionately about market share, profit margins, and competitive advantage. He showed charts and graphs demonstrating the business case. He explained why this strategy was crucial for the company's success. The response was polite applause and minimal enthusiasm. A few months later, a different leader addressed the same group about the same strategy. But instead of talking about market share, she talked about career opportunities. Instead of focusing on profit margins, she focused on skill development. Instead of emphasizing competitive advantage, she emphasized the chance to work on cutting-edge projects that would make them more valuable in the marketplace. She connected the company's goals to their personal goals. She showed them how the organization's success would create opportunities for their success. The response was electric. People asked thoughtful questions. They volunteered for challenging assignments. They began talking excitedly about the possibilities ahead. Same strategy, same company, same people. Completely different response. The difference was that the second leader understood a fundamental truth about inspiration. People don't get excited about your dreams until they see how your dreams connect to their dreams. Everyone you work with has personal aspirations. They want to grow in their careers. They want to develop new skills. They want to make a meaningful impact. They want to provide better lives for their families. They want to be recognized for their contributions. They want to feel proud of the work they do. When you can show someone how participating in your vision helps them achieve their vision, you've created alignment. When you can demonstrate that your success enables their success, you've created partnership. When you can prove that your goals serve their goals, you've created inspiration. But here's what most leaders miss. They assume everyone is motivated by the same things they're motivated by. They assume everyone cares about the same outcomes they care about. They assume everyone defines success the same way they define success. That's rarely true. The young employee might be motivated by learning opportunities more than financial rewards. The experienced employee might value recognition more than promotion. The working parent might prioritize flexibility more than advancement. The creative person might care more about interesting projects than prestigious titles. Until you understand what each person is trying to achieve in their own life, you can't show them how your objectives serve their objectives. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone about their personal goals? When did you ask what they hope to accomplish in the next year, the next 5 years? When did you explore what kind of work energizes them and what kind of work drains them? Most leaders focus entirely on business goals without ever discovering personal goals. They talk about what the organization needs without exploring what individuals want. They communicate their vision without connecting it to anyone else's vision. That's a missed opportunity of enormous proportions. When you take the time to understand what matters to each person, you can speak to what matters to each person. When you know their aspirations, you can show how your plans help them achieve their aspirations. When you understand their definition of success, you can demonstrate how your success contributes to their success. This isn't about changing your goals to match everyone else's goals. This is about finding the genuine connections between your goals and their goals. Those connections almost always exist, but they're not always obvious. The manager who wants to improve team performance might discover that his team members want to develop leadership skills. The connection give them opportunities to lead improvement. Initiatives. The executive who wants to expand into new markets might learn that her employees want to work on innovative projects. The connection. Position the expansion as a chance to pioneer new approaches and build cutting-edge capabilities. The entrepreneur who wants to grow his business might find that his staff wants to feel like they're making a difference in the world. The connection. Show them how the business growth enables greater impact on customers and communities. When people see how your success creates opportunities for their success, they don't just comply with your requests, they champion your cause. They don't just participate in your vision, they contribute to it with their energy, creativity, and commitment. They become partners in the outcome rather than just participants in the process. That's when you move from getting people to do what you want to getting people to want what you want. That's when you transform from someone who assigns tasks to someone who inspires action. Speak to their dreams, and they'll help you achieve yours. Inspiration flows from action. Be the model. Be the standard. Let your life speak louder than your words. I knew a manager who was passionate about punctuality. He held team meetings about the importance of being on time. He sent emails about how tardiness affected productivity. He gave speeches about respect and professionalism. He created policies with consequences for lateness. He was also consistently 10 minutes late to his own meetings. His team continued to arrive late, despite all his efforts to change their behavior. They heard his words, but they followed his example. They did what he did, not what he said. Then I knew another manager who never said a word about punctuality. She simply arrived 15 minutes early to every meeting. She was prepared, organized, and ready to start exactly on time. She began meetings promptly whether everyone was there or not. She ended meetings on schedule regardless of how much remained to be discussed. Her team became the most punctual in the company, not because she demanded it, but because she modeled it. That's the power of example over exhortation. People watch what you do more carefully than they listen to what you say. They notice the choices you make, the standards you maintain, the effort you invest. They observe how you handle pressure, how you treat others, how you respond to setbacks. Your behavior becomes their permission. Your example becomes their expectation. Your standards become their standards. If you want people to work harder yourself. If you want people to communicate more clearly yourself. If you want people to show more initiative yourself. If you want people to treat customers better, treat everyone better yourself. You cannot inspire behavior you don't demonstrate. You cannot call people to standards you don't maintain. You cannot expect excellence from others while accepting mediocrity from yourself. But let me ask you this. Are you asking people to do things you're not willing to do yourself? Are you expecting behaviors from others that you don't consistently exhibit? Are you calling for changes that you haven't made in your own approach? Most people focus on changing everyone else before they focus on changing themselves. They see what others need to improve without seeing what they need to improve. They notice other people's shortcomings without noticing their own. That approach never works for inspiration, because inspiration is fundamentally about modeling the possibilities. It's about showing people what's possible by living it yourself. It's about proving that the changes you're asking for are not only possible, but worthwhile. When people see you consistently demonstrating the behavior you're advocating, they begin to believe that behavior is achievable. When they watch you maintaining the standards you're promoting, they begin to see those standards as reasonable. When they observe you getting positive results from the approach you're suggesting, they begin to want those results for themselves. Your example doesn't just teach them what to do. It shows them that it can be done. I've watched leaders transform entire organizations simply by changing how they operated themselves. A CEO who started acknowledging mistakes publicly created a culture where everyone felt safe to admit errors and learn from them. A department head who began asking for input from the newest team members inspired everyone to value diverse perspectives. A project manager who started following through on every commitment earned a team that followed through on theirs. They didn't announce new policies or launch improvement programs. They just started being the kind of leader they wanted their people to become. They became the change they wanted to see. The most inspiring leaders I've encountered understood this principle completely. They didn't just talk about values, they lived them. They didn't just promote excellence, they pursued it relentlessly in their own work. They didn't just encourage growth, they never stopped growing themselves. People didn't follow them because of their position or their authority. People followed them because of their example. They followed them because they wanted to become more like them. Here's what happens when you lead by example instead of exhortation. People stop seeing improvement as something being imposed on them and start seeing it as something being modeled for them. They stop feeling criticized and start feeling inspired. They stop resisting change and start embracing it. Your example gives them permission to change. Your standards give them a target to aim for. Your consistency gives them confidence that sustained improvement is possible. But remember, people are watching everything you do, not just the things you want them to notice. They see how you handle stress, how you treat service people, how you respond when things don't go your way. They notice whether your private behavior matches your public message. The most powerful inspiration comes from leaders whose character is consistent, whose effort is genuine, and whose commitment to excellence is evident in everything they do. Be that leader. Be the example. Let your actions inspire the actions of others. People are drawn to those who make them feel safe, not small. Kindness creates openness. I once observed two managers handling similar situations with completely different approaches. Both had team members who were struggling with performance. Both needed to address the issue and get better results. The first manager called his employee into his office. He sat behind his large desk, maintained a stern expression, and delivered a formal performance review. He outlined the problems, set clear expectations, and explained the consequences of not improving. The conversation was professional, direct, and intimidating. The employee left that meeting feeling defensive, anxious, and small. He improved just enough to avoid getting fired, but never became genuinely engaged or committed. The second manager approached her struggling employee very differently. She suggested they grab coffee together. She chose a comfortable setting away from the office. She started by acknowledging the employee's strengths and expressing appreciation for his efforts. Then she gently explored what might be making his work challenging. What she discovered was that he was dealing with personal issues that were affecting his concentration. He was embarrassed to ask for help and worried about losing his job. The warmth she showed made him feel safe enough to share what was really going on. Together, they developed a plan that addressed both his personal situation and his work performance. Within a few weeks, he was not only meeting expectations, but exceeding them. More importantly, he had become one of her most loyal and productive team members. The difference wasn't in the message. The difference was in the delivery. One approach used authority to create compliance. The other used warmth to create connection. Here's what I've learned about human nature. People don't open up to authority. They open up to warmth. They don't share their real challenges with people who make them feel judged. They share with people who make them feel accepted. And you can't solve problems you don't know about. You can't address concerns that people won't reveal. You can't help with challenges that remain hidden. Warmth creates the safety that allows people to be honest about their struggles, their concerns, their ideas, and their aspirations. Authority creates the fear that keeps all of those things locked away. Think about the people in your own life who have influenced you most. Were they the ones who used their position to pressure you? Or were they the ones who used their care to connect with you? Were they the ones who made you feel small and intimidated? Or were they the ones who made you feel valued and understood most? Likely, the people who inspired you most were the ones who combined competence with kindness, expertise with empathy, strength with warmth. But let me ask you this. When you're trying to influence someone, do you lead with your authority or with your warmth? Do you emphasize your position or your care? Do you create distance or connection? Many people believe that warmth undermines authority. They think that being kind makes them appear weak. They worry that showing care will cause people to take advantage of them. The opposite is true. Warmth doesn't undermine authority. It enhances it. People are more willing to follow someone they trust, and trust comes from feeling safe, not afraid. Kindness doesn't make you appear weak. It makes you appear strong enough to be vulnerable. Showing care doesn't invite people to take advantage. It invites them to reciprocate. The strongest leaders I've known were also the warmest. They had high standards, and they enforced them, but they did so with genuine care for the people involved. They held people accountable, but they also supported them. They demanded excellence, but they also provided encouragement. People didn't just respect them, they loved working for them. They didn't just comply with their requests, they went above and beyond to meet their expectations. That's the power of warmth-based leadership. When people feel safe with you, they bring you their best ideas. When they feel judged by you, they bring you only safe ideas. When they feel supported by you, they take risks that lead to breakthroughs. When they feel threatened by you, they play it safe and settle for mediocrity. Warmth opens people up. Authority closes them down. Warmth invites contribution. Authority demands compliance. Warmth creates partnership. Authority creates distance. This doesn't mean being soft or avoiding difficult conversations. This means having those conversations with care, respect, and genuine concern for the other person's well-being and success. It means starting with empathy instead of evaluation. It means asking about their perspective before sharing yours. It means looking for solutions instead of just pointing out problems. Most importantly, it means treating people as human beings with feelings, fears, and hopes, not just as employees, with tasks to complete. When you approach people with warmth, they approach you with openness. When you treat them with kindness, they respond with commitment. When you make them feel safe, they make you successful. That's not just good leadership. That's inspired leadership. Remember names, remember stories, show people they matter, and they'll move mountains beside you. There's a restaurant I visit whenever I'm in Chicago. The food is good, but that's not why I return. I return because the owner, Maria, remembers my name. She remembers that I prefer the corner table. She remembers that I take my coffee black. She asks about my work, and more remarkably, she remembers my answers from previous visits. "How did that presentation go?" she'll ask months later. "Did your daughter end up choosing that college you mentioned?" In a world where most interactions feel anonymous and transactional, Maria makes me feel seen. She makes me feel like I matter. And because of that, I've recommended her restaurant to dozens of people. I've brought clients there. I've celebrated important occasions there. That's the power of making people feel seen. Most people move through their days feeling invisible. They go to work, attend meetings, interact with colleagues, and feel like just another face in the crowd. They contribute ideas that get overlooked. They achieve results that go unnoticed. They deal with challenges that no one acknowledges. Then they encounter someone who truly sees them, who remembers their name, acknowledges their contributions, shows interest in their concerns, and everything changes. That person becomes someone they want to work with, help, and support. Here's what I've observed about human nature. People will do extraordinary things for those who make them feel extraordinary. They'll go above and beyond for leaders who notice when they go above and beyond. They'll be loyal to those who see their value when others don't. But making people feel seen requires more than just remembering their names, though that's a good start. It requires paying attention to the details that matter to them. It requires noticing their efforts, their improvements, their struggles, their successes. It requires seeing them as complete human beings, not just as functions in your organization. I once worked with a leader who kept a simple notebook. In it, he wrote down personal details about every person on his team. Sarah's son played baseball. Michael was taking night classes to finish his degree. Lisa had just moved to a new apartment. Tom was dealing with his father's illness. Before he eats every interaction, he would quickly review his notes. He would ask Sarah about her son's last game. He would check with Michael about his classes. He would ask Lisa how she was settling into her new place. He would inquire about Tom's father. These weren't long conversations. They were brief moments of genuine interest, but they transformed every relationship. People felt valued, understood, and important. They knew their leader saw them as people, not just as employees. The result was remarkable loyalty and exceptional performance. People didn't just work for him, they worked with him. They didn't just fulfill their job descriptions. They looked for ways to contribute beyond expectations. But let me ask you this. How well do you really know the people you're trying to inspire? Do you know what's happening in their lives outside of work? Do you know what their goals are, what their concerns are, what their interests are? Most leaders know their people's job performance, but not their personal aspirations. They know their skills, but not their stories. They know their output, but not their obstacles. That's a missed opportunity for connection and inspiration. When you take the time to learn about someone's life, you discover what motivates them. When you remember details about their experiences, you show that they matter to you. When you ask follow-up questions about things they've shared, you demonstrate genuine interest in their well-being. This attention to detail doesn't require hours of time. It requires moments of focus. It requires choosing to see people as individuals rather than as roles. It requires remembering that everyone has a story, everyone has challenges, everyone has dreams. The most inspiring leaders I've known were masters at making people feel seen. They remembered the small things that were big things to others. They acknowledged contributions that might have gone unnoticed. They celebrated achievements that might have seemed minor, but meant everything to the person who achieved them. They understood that recognition isn't just about big accomplishments and formal awards. It's about daily acknowledgement of effort, improvement, and value. When someone feels truly seen by you, they don't just want to meet your expectations. They want to exceed them. They don't just want to complete their assignments. They want to find ways to make your job easier and your organization better. They become invested in your success because they know you're invested in theirs. That's the difference between managing people and inspiring people. Management focuses on tasks and results. Inspiration focuses on people and potential. See people for who they are, not just what they do. Remember what matters to them, not just what matters to you. Show them they're important to you as individuals, not just valuable to you as contributors. Make people feel seen, and they'll help you achieve things you never thought possible. Genuine excitement is contagious. When your belief is visible, it sparks belief in others. I once attended a meeting where a project manager had to present a challenging initiative to a skeptical team. The project was complex, the timeline was tight, and the resources were limited. Everyone expected a difficult conversation filled with objections and resistance. Instead, something remarkable happened. The project manager walked into that room with unmistakable energy. Her eyes were bright. Her voice was animated. Her entire presence communicated excitement about the possibilities ahead. She didn't minimize the challenges, but she was clearly energized by the opportunity to tackle them. She talked about the project like it was the most interesting work any of them would ever do. She described the challenges like they were puzzles, worth solving. She presented the tight timeline like it was a chance to do something extraordinary together. By the end of her presentation, the entire room had shifted. People were asking thoughtful questions instead of raising objections. They were volunteering for difficult assignments instead of avoiding them. They were talking about solutions instead of problems. Her enthusiasm had become their enthusiasm. Her energy had become their energy. Her excitement about the project had made them excited about the project. That's the power of genuine enthusiasm. Energy is contagious. When you're truly excited about something, that excitement spreads to others. When you believe deeply in a vision, that belief becomes visible and influences everyone around you. When you approach challenges with energy and optimism, others begin to see those challenges as opportunities too. But here's the crucial point. The enthusiasm has to be genuine. People can sense the difference between authentic excitement and manufactured motivation. They can tell when your energy comes from real belief versus when it comes from trying to convince yourself as much as them. Fake enthusiasm creates cynicism. Real enthusiasm creates inspiration. Think about the people who have most inspired you to take action. Were they people who were going through the motions, or were they people who were genuinely excited about what they were doing? Were they people who seemed obligated to promote an idea, or were they people who couldn't contain their enthusiasm for it? Most likely, the people who inspired you most were the ones whose belief was so strong you could feel it. Their energy was so genuine you wanted to share it. Their excitement was so contagious you caught it. But let me ask you this. When you're trying to inspire others, how much genuine enthusiasm do you bring to the conversation? When you're presenting an idea or requesting action, does your energy suggest that you believe this is worth doing, or does it suggest that you're just doing your job? Most people present their ideas like they're delivering information rather than sharing opportunities. They focus on the logical case without communicating the emotional case. They explain what needs to be done without expressing why they're excited about doing it. That approach might get compliance, but it rarely gets commitment. It might get people to do what you ask, but it won't get them to do it with energy and creativity. Enthusiasm changes everything about how people receive your message. When you're genuinely excited about something, people lean in instead of checking out. They ask questions instead of making excuses. They look for ways to contribute instead of reasons to avoid participating. Your enthusiasm tells them this is worth their attention. Your energy tells them this is worth their effort. Your excitement tells them this could be worth their commitment. I've watched leaders transform entire organizations simply by bringing authentic enthusiasm to their interactions. A CEO who was genuinely excited about serving customers better inspired everyone to find new ways to exceed expectations. A department head who was energized by developing people's skills created a culture where everyone was committed to growth. A team leader who was passionate about solving problems motivated everyone to see challenges as opportunities. They didn't just communicate their vision, they radiated their belief in it. They didn't just explain their goals, they demonstrated their excitement about achieving them. But remember, you can't fake this. People can tell when enthusiasm is genuine and when it's performed. They can sense when your excitement comes from real belief versus when it comes from trying to motivate others. The enthusiasm has to start with you. You have to find something genuinely exciting about what you're asking people to do. You have to discover something that energizes you about the vision you're promoting. You have to connect with something that makes you believe this work is worth doing well. When you find that genuine source of excitement, it shows. When you tap into authentic enthusiasm, it spreads. When your energy comes from real belief, it creates real belief in others. That's when inspiration becomes effortless. That's when people don't just follow your lead, they share your passion, find what excites you about your vision, and let that excitement be visible. Your enthusiasm will create the energy that turns possibility into reality. Greatness often hides behind insecurity. Speak to the potential you see, not just the performance you witness. I once knew a young man who worked in our mailroom. Quiet, hard-working, but seemingly unremarkable. He did his job well, but nothing about his performance suggested exceptional ability. Most people barely noticed him. He blended into the background of office life. One day, I happened to overhear him on the phone with a difficult customer who had called the wrong department. Instead of simply transferring the call, he listened patiently to the customer's problem. He asked thoughtful questions. He took detailed notes. Then he personally walked the customer's information to the right department and followed up to make sure the issue was resolved. I was impressed by his initiative and customer focus. I mentioned this to him and asked about his career interests. What I discovered surprised me. He had been studying business at night school for 3 years. He had ideas about improving our customer service processes. He had been watching our operations and thinking about ways to make them more efficient. He had potential that no one had recognized because no one had looked for it. Within 6 months, he was working in our customer service department. Within a year, he was leading a team. Within 3 years, he had been promoted to management. The mailroom clerk became one of our most valuable leaders. What would have happened if I had never had that conversation? What would have happened if I had assumed his current role reflected his full potential? What would have happened if no one had ever asked about his interests and aspirations? His talents would have remained hidden. His potential would have stayed unrealized. Our organization would have missed out on his contributions. Here's what I learned from that experience. You should never assume someone else's potential based on their current performance or position. Potential often hides behind circumstances, insecurity, or lack of opportunity. The person who seems disengaged might be unchallenged. The person who appears limited might be underutilized. The person who looks ordinary might be extraordinary in areas you haven't explored. Most people have capabilities they haven't fully developed, ideas they haven't shared, and contributions they haven't been invited to make. They have strengths that don't show up in their current role. They have insights that no one has asked for. They have potential that no one has recognized. But it's easy to miss this potential if you only look at surface performance. It's easy to underestimate people if you judge them based on their current output rather than their underlying capability. Think about your own experience. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't see your full potential? Have you ever been limited by others' assumptions about what you could accomplish? Have you ever surprised someone by exceeding their expectations? Most people have been on both sides of this equation. They've been underestimated by others, and they've underestimated others. They've had their potential overlooked, and they've overlooked potential in others. But let me ask you this. When you look at the people around you, what do you see? Do you see their current performance, or do you look for their untapped potential? Do you notice what they're not doing well, or do you look for strengths they might not be using fully? The most inspiring leaders I've known were talent scouts. They looked for potential that others missed. They saw capabilities that others overlooked. They recognized value that others didn't appreciate. They understood that their job wasn't just to manage current performance. It was to develop future potential. They knew that their success depended not just on what people were already doing well, but on what they could learn to do well. This requires a different way of looking at people. Instead of judging them based on their current role, you assess them based on their underlying abilities. Instead of evaluating them based on their current output, you explore their interests, their strengths, their aspirations. You ask questions like, what energizes you most about your work? What would you like to learn how to do? What opportunities interest you most? What strengths do you have that you don't get to use much in your current role? These questions often reveal potential that wasn't visible in day-to-day performance. They uncover interests that could become expertise. They discover capabilities that could become contributions. When you recognize potential that others have missed, something powerful happens. The person feels seen and valued in a new way. They begin to see themselves differently. They start to believe they can do more than they thought they could do. But more importantly, they start to prove it. They begin to develop the potential you recognized. They grow into the capabilities you saw. They become the person you believed they could become. That's the power of seeing potential instead of just performance. That's the difference between managing what is and inspiring what could be. Don't assume that someone's current role reflects their full capability. Don't assume that their current performance represents their maximum potential. Don't assume that what you see today is all they'll ever be able to contribute. Look deeper. Ask more questions. Explore their interests. Discover their strengths. Recognize their potential. You might be surprised by what you find. More importantly, they might be surprised by what they're capable of achieving when someone finally sees what they're capable of becoming. People flourish under appreciation. Catch them doing something right, and they'll want to do more. I knew a teacher who had a remarkable ability to transform struggling students. While other teachers focused on correcting mistakes and pointing out deficiencies, she had a completely different approach. She looked for something, anything, that each student was doing right, and she made sure they knew she noticed. To the student who always disrupted class but asked thoughtful questions, she said, "Your curiosity about this topic is exactly what makes a great learner." To the student who struggled with writing but had creative ideas, she said, "Your imagination brings fresh perspectives that no one else thinks of." To the student who was behind in reading but always helped classmates, she said, "Your kindness makes everyone feel welcome here." What happened next was remarkable. The disruptive student began channeling his curiosity into productive research. The struggling writer started developing her creative ideas more fully. The slow reader became a classroom leader who helped others while improving his own skills. She understood something fundamental about human nature. People move toward appreciation and away from criticism. They repeat behaviors that get recognized and develop strengths that get acknowledged. Focus on what's good, and you get more of what's good. Here's what most people miss about motivation. They spend most of their energy trying to fix what's wrong instead of building on what's right. They notice mistakes more than successes. They comment on problems more than progress. They focus on weaknesses more than strengths. That approach might eliminate some negatives, but it rarely creates positives. It might stop bad performance, but it doesn't inspire great performance. Think about your own experience. When someone constantly points out your mistakes, how does it affect your motivation? When someone focuses on your shortcomings, how does it impact your confidence? When someone emphasizes what you're not doing well, how does it influence your willingness to take risks and try new approaches? Most people become defensive, cautious, and focused on avoiding mistakes rather than achieving excellence. They spend more energy protecting themselves from criticism than pursuing opportunities for improvement. Now think about how you feel when someone notices and appreciates your strengths, when someone acknowledges your progress, when someone recognizes your contributions, when someone celebrates your successes. You feel energized. You feel confident. You feel motivated to do even better. You want to live up to their positive opinion of you. You want to earn more of their recognition and appreciation. That's the power of focusing on the good. But let me ask you this. When you're trying to inspire someone, what gets more of your attention? Their mistakes or their successes? Their weaknesses or their strengths? What they're doing wrong or what they're doing right? Most people have been trained to be problem spotters rather than strength builders. They notice what's broken rather than what's working. They see gaps rather than gains. They focus on deficits rather than assets. This focus on problems might seem practical, but it's actually counterproductive for inspiration. When you constantly point out what's wrong, people begin to see themselves as problem creators rather than solution contributors. When you emphasize their weaknesses, they begin to doubt their ability to improve. When you focus on their failures, they begin to fear taking risks that might lead to more failures. The most inspiring leaders I've known flipped this approach completely. They became strength spotters and progress celebrators. They looked for evidence of improvement, no matter how small. They acknowledged effort, not just results. They recognized potential, not just performance. They understood that people have both strengths and weaknesses, both successes and failures, both progress and setbacks. The question is, which do you choose to focus on? When you focus on strengths, people develop their strengths further. When you acknowledge progress, people continue progressing. When you celebrate successes, people pursue more successes. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or avoiding necessary corrections. It means leading with appreciation before moving to improvement. It means building confidence before addressing concerns. It means helping people feel capable before asking them to become more capable. The sequence matters enormously. When someone feels good about what they're already doing well, they're open to doing even better. When someone feels bad about what they're not doing well, they're resistant to trying harder. Here's a simple practice that can transform your ability to inspire. Before every conversation about improvement, identify something the person is doing well. Before every piece of corrective feedback, offer a piece of appreciative feedback. Before every request for change, acknowledge something you want them to continue. Catch people doing things right. Notice when they make progress. Recognize when they show effort. Appreciate when they contribute value. Make them feel good about their strengths, and they'll be motivated to develop more strengths. Make them feel appreciated for their contributions, and they'll look for more ways to contribute. Focus on the good and watch it grow. Asking the right question leads people to the right answer and makes the solution their own. I once watched a master coach work with a struggling athlete. The athlete was frustrated, making the same mistake repeatedly and growing more discouraged with each failed attempt. Most coaches would have stopped the action and given direct instruction. Keep your elbow up. Follow through. Focus on your form. Instead, this coach asked a simple question. What do you notice about your last 3 attempts? The athlete paused, thought for a moment, then said, I think my elbow is dropping too early. What do you think might help with that? The coach asked, maybe if I focus on keeping it up through the entire motion? Try that and see what happens. The next attempt was significantly better. The athlete had discovered the solution himself, which meant he understood it more deeply and could apply it more consistently. That's the power of guiding with questions instead of commanding with answers. When you tell someone what to do, you give them information. When you ask them what they think they should do, you help them develop insight. Information can be forgotten or misunderstood. Insight becomes part of their thinking process. Most people approach problems by providing solutions. They see what needs to be fixed and they explain how to fix it. They identify what's wrong and they tell others how to make it right. They spot the issue and they give the answer. This approach might solve the immediate problem, but it doesn't. Develop the person's ability to solve similar problems in the future. It creates dependency rather than capability. It makes people followers of instructions rather than creators of solutions. Questions work differently. The right question helps people discover what they already know but haven't articulated. It helps them see connections they hadn't noticed. It guides them to insights they can own and apply. Think about your own learning experiences. What has been more powerful for you? Being told the right answer or being asked the right questions that led you to discover the answer yourself? What has created more lasting change? Following someone else's instructions or developing your own understanding of what needed to be done? Most likely, the insights you discovered yourself have stayed with you longer and influenced your thinking more deeply than the advice you were given by others. But let me ask you this. When someone comes to you with a problem, what's your first instinct? To give them the answer or to ask them questions that help them find the answer? When someone is struggling with a decision, do you tell them what you think they should do, or do you ask them questions that help them think through their options? Most people jump straight to giving advice. They want to be helpful, so they share their solutions. They want to save time, so they provide answers. They want to demonstrate their knowledge, so they explain what they think should be done. But this approach often misses the mark. The solution that makes sense to you might not make sense to them. The answer that works in your situation might not work in theirs. The approach that fits your style might not fit their capabilities. More importantly, when you give someone an answer, you solve their immediate problem, but you don't increase their ability to solve future problems. When you ask questions that lead them to the answer, you help them develop the thinking skills they need to handle similar situations independently. The most inspiring leaders I've known were master questioners. They didn't tell people what to think. They asked questions that helped people think more clearly. They didn't impose their solutions. They guided others to discover better solutions. They didn't create followers. They developed leaders. They asked questions like, what do you think is causing this problem? What options have you considered? What would happen if you tried this approach? What concerns do you have about moving forward? What would success look like to you? These questions did more than gather information. They stimulated thinking. They encouraged exploration. They invited creativity. They developed problem-solving capabilities. When people arrive at solutions through their own thinking process, several important things happen. They understand the solution more deeply because they've thought it through themselves. They're more committed to implementing it because it feels like their idea. They're more likely to adapt it when circumstances change because they understand the underlying principles. They're better prepared to handle similar situations because they've developed their analytical skills. This doesn't mean never sharing your thoughts or insights. It means asking questions first to understand their perspective, then offering your ideas as additional input rather than final answers. Guide people to their own discoveries. Help them develop their own insights. Empower them to create their own solutions. Questions inspire thinking. Commands inspire compliance. Choose questions when you want to develop people, not just direct them. People respond to those who make them feel important. Show sincere curiosity. That's how trust is born. I once attended a networking event where I observed two very different approaches to building relationships. The first person I watched worked the room like a salesman. He talked enthusiastically about his business, his achievements, his plans. He handed out business cards while sharing impressive statistics about his company's growth. He told engaging stories about his recent successes and upcoming opportunities. People listened politely, took his cards, and moved on to other conversations. The second person took a completely different approach. She asked questions. She listened intently to the answers. She asked follow-up questions that showed she was genuinely interested in what people were telling her. She remembered details from earlier in the conversation and referenced them later. You mentioned you're dealing with supply chain challenges. What's been the most difficult part of that? That's fascinating that you started your business after traveling in Southeast Asia. What inspired that connection? It sounds like your team has grown quickly this year. How are you handling the management transition? By the end of the evening, she was surrounded by people who wanted to continue their conversations with her. She had business cards pressed into her hands along with invitations to follow-up meetings. Multiple people asked if they could introduce her to others who should meet her. The difference was striking. The first person tried to be interesting. The second person chose to be interested. Here's what I learned from watching these two approaches. People don't connect with those who try to impress them. They connect with those who show genuine interest in them. Everyone wants to feel important. Everyone wants to feel heard. Everyone wants to feel like their thoughts, experiences, and perspectives matter. When you show sincere interest in someone, you give them all of those feelings. When you try to be interesting, you're asking for attention. When you choose to be interested, you're giving attention, and people are drawn to those who give attention, much more than those who seek it. Think about the people you most enjoy spending time with. Are they the ones who talk about themselves constantly, or the ones who ask about you? Are they the ones who try to impress you with their accomplishments, or the ones who show genuine curiosity about your experiences? Most likely, the people you're drawn to are those who make you feel valued through their interest in your life, your work, your thoughts, your challenges. But let me ask you this. When you're trying to build a relationship with someone, do you focus more on what you want them to know about you or what you want to know about them? Do you spend more time talking about your interests or asking about theirs? Most people approach relationship building backwards. They think they need to be impressive to be liked. They think they need to be entertaining to be valued. They think they need to be remarkable to be remembered. The opposite is true. You become impressive to others when you're impressed by them. You become entertaining to others when you're entertained by them. You become remarkable to others when you find them remarkable. This isn't a technique or a manipulation. This is about genuine curiosity and authentic interest in other people's lives, experiences, and perspectives. This is about recognizing that every person has something unique to offer, something interesting to share, something valuable to contribute. The most inspiring leaders I've known were genuinely fascinated by people. They asked thoughtful questions. Not because they were trying to build rapport, but because they were truly curious about the answers. They listened intently, not because they were following a communication strategy, but because they found people's stories compelling. They understood that everyone has lived a life full of experiences that no one else has had. Everyone has developed insights that no one else has developed. Everyone has perspectives that no one else can offer. When you approach people with that mindset, your interest becomes naturally genuine. Your curiosity becomes authentic. Your questions become meaningful rather than mechanical. What's been the most rewarding part of your current role? What's the biggest challenge facing your industry right now? What changes have you seen in your field over the past few years? What's the most interesting project you've worked on recently? These aren't just conversation starters. These are windows into someone's world. These are invitations for them to share what matters to them, what excites them, what concerns them. When you ask questions like these and truly listen to the answers, something powerful happens. The other person feels valued. They feel heard. They feel important. And people want to work with, help, and support those who make them feel that way. But remember, the interest has to be genuine. People can sense when someone is asking questions just to seem interested versus when they're asking because they truly want to know. Fake curiosity creates distance. Real curiosity creates connection. Be genuinely interested in others, and they'll become genuinely interested in working with you. Show sincere curiosity about their world, and they'll invite you into it. That's how relationships are built. That's how trust is earned. That's how inspiration begins. Inspire by offering clarity when someone feels lost. One powerful sentence can shift an entire mindset. I remember a moment early in my career when I was paralyzed by uncertainty. I had been presented with an opportunity that excited me but also terrified me. It was a significant step up in responsibility, but I wasn't sure I was ready. I was torn between the fear of failing and the fear of missing out on a chance to grow. I shared my dilemma with a mentor, expecting him to tell me what I should do. Instead, he asked me a question that changed everything. What would you attempt if you knew you couldn't fail? Without hesitation, I said I would take the opportunity. In that moment, I realized my uncertainty wasn't about whether the opportunity was right for me. It was about whether I was brave enough to pursue it. That one question transformed my doubt into direction. It helped me see that my fear was keeping me from something I actually wanted to do. It gave me the clarity I needed to move forward with confidence. That's the power of turning doubt into direction. Everyone faces moments of uncertainty. Everyone experiences times when they're not sure which path to take, which decision to make, which risk to accept or avoid. In those moments, they're not looking for someone to make the decision for them. They're looking for someone to help them see their situation more clearly. The most inspiring leaders I've known had a remarkable ability to provide that clarity. They didn't tell people what to do, but they helped people see what they wanted to do. They didn't eliminate uncertainty, but they helped people navigate it with greater confidence. They understood that doubt often isn't about lacking the right answer. It's about lacking the right perspective. When someone can't see their path clearly, often all they need is someone to help them look at their situation from a different angle. Think about times when you've been uncertain about a decision. What helped you move forward? Was it someone giving you detailed advice? Or was it someone asking a question that helped you clarify your own thinking? Was it someone telling you what they would do? Or was it someone helping you discover what you wanted to do? Most likely, the breakthrough came when someone helped you see something you already knew but hadn't articulated, or helped you consider something you hadn't thought about before. That's what great leaders do when they encounter doubt in others. They don't rush to provide answers. They take time to understand the uncertainty. They help people explore their concerns, examine their options, and clarify their priorities. Sometimes doubt comes from fear of making the wrong choice. In those cases, inspiring leaders help people see that most decisions aren't permanent and most mistakes aren't fatal. They remind them that the biggest risk is often not taking any risk at all. Sometimes doubt comes from having too many options. In those cases, inspiring leaders help people clarify their criteria for making decisions. They ask questions like, what matters most to you in this situation? What would success look like? What are you hoping to achieve? Sometimes doubt comes from lack of confidence. In those cases, inspiring leaders help people remember their past successes and recognize their current capabilities. They remind them of challenges they've overcome before and strengths they can draw upon now. But let me ask you this. When someone comes to you with uncertainty, what's your typical response? Do you immediately offer solutions, or do you first seek to understand their doubt? Do you tell them what you think they should do, or do you help them discover what they think they should do? Most people want to be helpful by providing quick answers. They see someone struggling with uncertainty and they offer advice based on what they would do in that situation. But what works for you might not work for them. What makes sense given your experience might not make sense given theirs. More importantly, when you give someone an answer to their doubt, you solve their immediate uncertainty, but you don't increase their ability to handle future uncertainty. When you help them work through their doubt, you build their decision-making capabilities for similar situations they'll face later. The most powerful thing you can do when someone is experiencing doubt is to ask questions that help them think more clearly about their situation. Questions like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you move forward? What's the worst thing that could happen if you don't? What information would help you feel more confident about this decision? What would you tell someone else? In this same situation, these questions don't provide answers. They provide frameworks for thinking. They don't eliminate uncertainty. They help people navigate it more effectively. When you turn someone's doubt into direction, you don't just help them make one decision. You help them develop the thinking skills they need to make better decisions throughout their life. That's not just problem solving, that's empowerment. That's inspiration that lasts long after the immediate uncertainty is resolved. Repetition creates belief. Speak the vision so often and so clearly that others begin to see it as their own. I once worked with a leader who had a bold vision for transforming her organization. She wanted to create a culture where innovation thrived, where people felt empowered to suggest improvements, where everyone took ownership of results. It was an inspiring vision, but it was also a dramatic departure from how things currently operated. In her first presentation about this vision, people listened politely but skeptically. They had heard about change initiatives before. They had seen visions announced with great fanfare only to fade away when day-to-day pressures mounted. But this leader was different. She didn't just announce the vision once and assume people would embrace it. She talked about it constantly. In every meeting, she found ways to connect the discussion back to the vision. In every decision, she explained how it supported the direction they were heading. In every success, she celebrated how it reflected their new way of operating. She repeated the vision so often that some people initially joked about it. There she goes again, talking about innovation and empowerment. But something remarkable happened over time. The joking stopped. The skepticism faded. People began to talk about the vision as if it were their own idea. We're the kind of organization that encourages new ideas. We believe in empowering people to make decisions. We take ownership of our results. The vision had become their reality, not because it was imposed on them, but because they had heard it so often and so consistently that they began to believe it was true. That's the power of repetition in inspiration. Most leaders think that if they communicate a vision once, clearly, and passionately, people will automatically embrace it and work toward it. They announce their goals, explain their strategy, and then assume everyone is aligned and motivated. But here's what they miss. People need to hear a message multiple times before they truly understand it. They need to see it applied in various situations before they believe it's real. They need to experience it repeatedly before they start to own it themselves. One announcement creates awareness. Consistent repetition creates belief. Think about the messages that have most influenced your own thinking and behavior. Were they things you heard once or things you heard repeatedly? Were they ideas that were mentioned occasionally or principles that were reinforced constantly? Most likely, the concepts that have shaped your approach to work and life are ones you've encountered many times in many different contexts from multiple sources. That's how vision becomes reality. Not through single moments of inspiration, but through consistent reinforcement of the same core messages. But let me ask you this. When you have a vision for change or improvement, how often do you talk about it? When you've explained your goals and strategy, do you assume people remember and embrace them? Or do you continue to reinforce them regularly? Most people suffer from what I call announcement fatigue. They get tired of talking about the same vision repeatedly. They assume that because they've explained it clearly, everyone understands and accepts it. They worry that continued repetition will make them seem redundant or obsessive. But here's what they don't realize. Just because you're tired of saying it doesn't mean people are tired of hearing it. Just because you've explained it clearly doesn't mean people have absorbed it completely. Just because you understand it deeply doesn't mean everyone else does. The most inspiring leaders I've known understood that repetition isn't redundancy, it's reinforcement. They knew that messages need to be repeated not because people are slow to understand, but because people are busy with many competing priorities and need consistent reminders about what matters most. They found different ways to communicate the same core vision. They told stories that illustrated the principles. They shared examples that demonstrated the values. They celebrated successes that reflected the direction they were heading. They made the vision visible, not just in formal presentations, but in daily conversations, regular decisions, and ongoing recognition. They wove the message into everything they did until it became part of the organizational fabric. But here's the crucial point. The repetition has to be consistent, not just frequent. You can't talk about innovation on Monday and compliance on Tuesday. You can't emphasize empowerment in meetings and micromanage in practice. You can't promote ownership in speeches and blame others when problems arise. People watch for consistency between what you say repeatedly and what you do consistently. When those align, repetition creates belief. When they don't align, repetition creates cynicism. The vision you repeat must be the vision you live. The principles you emphasize must be the principles you demonstrate. The future you describe must be the future you're actively working to create. When you repeat a vision consistently and live it authentically, something powerful happens. People stop seeing it as your vision and start seeing it as the vision. They stop thinking about whether they agree with it and start thinking about how they can contribute to it. Repetition transforms possibility into expectation. It turns hope into belief. It changes maybe someday into, this is who we are. Speak your vision clearly, then speak it again and again, until it's no longer just your vision, until it becomes everyone's reality. When people feel better after being around you, they'll follow you anywhere. That's how real influence begins. At the end of every interaction, every conversation, every meeting, people walk away with a feeling. They feel energized or drained. They feel valued or diminished. They feel hopeful or discouraged. They feel capable or inadequate. They feel inspired or deflated. That feeling determines everything that happens next. I've watched leaders who could deliver brilliant presentations that left people feeling small and overwhelmed. I've watched others who could have simple conversations that left people feeling empowered and excited. The difference wasn't in the complexity of their message or the sophistication of their strategy. The difference was how they made people feel. The leaders who inspired action weren't necessarily the smartest or the most articulate. They were the ones who consistently made people feel better about themselves and their possibilities after every interaction. Think about the people who have most inspired you to take action in your own life. What did they do that motivated you? Was it their impressive credentials or their ability to make you feel capable? Was it their sophisticated strategies or their gift for making you feel valued? Was it their commanding presence or their talent for making you feel heard? Most likely they inspired you not just through what they said, but through how they made you feel when they said it. They made you feel like you mattered. They made you feel like your contributions were valuable. They made you feel like you were capable of more than you had realized. That feeling became the foundation for action. That feeling became the source of motivation. That feeling became the reason you wanted to work with them, help them, and support their vision. Here's what I've learned about human nature. People forget what you say, but they never forget how you make them feel. They might not remember the specific words you used, but they'll always remember whether they felt encouraged or discouraged, valued or ignored, capable or inadequate after spending time with you. Those feelings create the emotional foundation for all future interactions. When someone feels good after being around you, they look forward to working with you again. When they feel bad after being around you, they avoid you when possible and comply reluctantly when necessary. But let me ask you this. After people interact with you, how do they feel? When they leave a conversation with you, do they feel energized or exhausted? When they finish a meeting you've led, do they feel motivated or discouraged? When they complete a project under your direction, do they feel proud or relieved? Most people focus on the content of their communication without considering the emotional impact. They concentrate on delivering information without thinking about how that information makes people feel. They emphasize getting their message across without considering whether their message builds people up or tears them down. But the emotional impact of your communication determines whether people are inspired to act on your message or motivated to resist it. When you make people feel capable, they attempt things they wouldn't have tried before. When you make them feel valued, they contribute more than they have to. When you make them feel heard, they share ideas they might have kept to themselves. When you make them feel important, they take ownership of outcomes they could have ignored. Most inspiring leaders I've known were masters of emotional impact. They understood that their job wasn't just to communicate information, it was to create feelings that motivated action. They didn't just share their vision, they made people feel excited about being part of that vision. They accomplished this through small but powerful choices in every interaction. They chose appreciation over criticism. They chose curiosity over judgment. They chose encouragement over discouragement. They chose warmth over coldness. They chose respect over dismissal. These weren't grand gestures or dramatic moments. These were subtle but consistent ways of interacting that made people feel better about themselves and their potential. They listened more than they talked. They asked about people's ideas before sharing their own. They acknowledged contributions before requesting more effort. They expressed confidence in people's abilities before asking them to stretch those abilities. They understood that inspiration isn't just about having the right message. It's about delivering that message in a way that makes people feel capable of responding to it. When you consistently make people feel better after being around you, something remarkable happens. They don't just want to work for you, they want to work with you. They don't just comply with your requests. They look for ways to exceed your expectations. They don't just participate in your vision, they become ambassadors for it. People will forgive many things from leaders who make them feel valued, capable, and important. They'll overlook mistakes, endure challenges, and persist through difficulties for leaders who consistently make them feel good about themselves and their contributions. That's not manipulation. That's recognition of a fundamental human need to feel valued and appreciated. That's understanding that people perform best when they feel best about themselves. Make people feel better after every interaction with you. Make them feel more capable, more valued, more important than they felt before. Make them feel like they matter to you and to the success of your shared goals. When you master the art of making people feel good about themselves, you master the art of inspiration. When people feel better because of you, they'll do better for you. You already have what it takes. Now go prove it.